And so even in Abraham's predicament, him being old and his wife being old, we recognize that they still were walking in a place where God had established a covenant. There's a promise over their life. And we realize God is declaring, I'm going to do this, and all I need for you to do is wait. How many of you realize sometimes the hardest thing in the world to do is wait on God? Especially when he gives no indication as to when he's coming, how he's moving, which direction he's coming from. Sometimes the hardest thing in the world is to wait on God. To wait on God to develop folk, to wait on God to get people lined up, to wait on God to manifest certain things that he's promised. You've been praying, you've been fasting, you've been waiting, you've been watching, and nothing seems to be manifested, and it becomes difficult every now and then to just sit and wait. When you want to be able to just jump in and help, and all I can do right now is just wait, because the word of the Lord declares that they that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. Look at somebody near you and tell them, after a while, you're going to be able to mount up with wings as eagles. You will be able to run and not be weary, and you shall walk and you shall not faint. But that's coming after a while, after a while, after a while, after a while. Touch two people around you and tell them, after a while. And so we recognize then, as God establishes his covenant with Abraham, we realize that Abraham realizes now, he says, well, all right, God, then if that's what you're saying, then that's what I'll do. But before God even begins to remind him of this covenant, he starts out telling me, he said, look, I don't want you to be afraid. And he said, I want you to understand that I am your exceedingly great reward. In essence, I know what you just did. I know the king of Sodom in chapter number 14 basically was trying to give you some stuff and trying to supply you, and you stepped back and decided, I can't take that from you lest you try to take the credit for making me who I am. Look at somebody and tell them, God ain't going to let nobody take the credit. When God gets through with you, look at your neighbor and tell them, for me, when God gets through. Your mama might be able to say she birthed you. Your daddy might be able to say you are his seed. But God is the only one who will be able to get the credit for walking you through what he walked you through, for covering you, for keeping you, for catching you. Look at somebody near you and tell them, grace caught me. And so then we find in the word of God, the Bible then tells us that even now, as God is reminding Abraham, he says, I've made a covenant. I have established my promise with you. I want you to understand that what I have done is I've even caused you to make a sacrifice to help you understand that I'm serious about this thing. This isn't any little sisters and brothers kind of cutting our fingers and pricking our fingers and touching, saying we blood brothers and pinky promise. And God said, no, this is a bit stronger than a pinky promise. In essence, what he's declaring, he said, I am going to make sure that the very thing that I have spoken is going to manifest, and I don't need your help doing it. And so we find that Abram now realizes, surely this thing can't possibly come to pass because the conditions are not right. Have you ever got stuck on the conditions? Have you ever started paying attention to what it looked like and what it felt like and what it seemed like? Have you ever taken account of your resources only to find out that you didn't have enough? It wasn't coming together. It just was not adding up. But I want you to understand that when God speaks a thing in your life, he's not looking at you. He's looking at him. Look at your neighbor and tell him it ain't your ability that God is considering. It's his power and his ability. And so we find that even as we march over to the 21st chapter, God remembers his covenant and he's made this promise, but we understand that there's some things that transpire before we get to have the party. And so we realize that even though now we recognize that Abraham and Sarah now have already produced another son, and we realize that Ishmael is on the scene. He's not the son of promise, but he is the son of flesh. Look at somebody near you, tell them, when you help God, you're going to always step up in your. And so we realize that even now, because it seems as though God is not going to possibly be able to make this thing happen because the conditions are not right. Our bodies are not right. We're old, and this can't certainly happen for us. But we find that even in a season of doubt where now Sarah, that's why you got to be careful about who you hook up with, because sometimes it's the folk that you're in covenant with who will bring you off course. I can't hear nobody talking to me. Look at somebody near you and tell them, I need to know if I can trust you. Can I trust you? Can I trust you to not let me miss God? Can I trust you to walk according to the promise of God? Can I trust you to hear the word of the Lord? And so we find that Sarah realizes, I'm too old to have a baby. And so she sends her husband. She said, why don't you hook up with my handmaiden and go in and be a wife to my handmaiden? Well, by this time, Abraham and Sarah have been in Canaan for 10 years. And they are 10 years childless. Well, if 10 is the number that represents the perfection of divine order, and God has spoken a word, then why in the world in our life lining up with the word of God? Don't you understand that sometimes God will allow contrary situations in your life that contradict the very word that he spoke? Don't you understand that God sometimes will declare for you, I'm healing you, and your body will seem like it gets sicker and sicker? Look at somebody near you, tell them, but the word don't lie. And so we find that Sarah decides, she says, well, I think we can kind of help God out. And Abraham, being who he was, he could have said no, because this is what God promised. But instead,